Hello, I'm Marianne Jett. We're at the May 2019 Coingeek Scaling Conference here in Toronto, Canada, and I'm here with Dr. Craig Wright. He is the Chief Scientist of nChain. Welcome, Dr. Wright. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Oh, great. So you had some really big news recently. You have just been granted 2 copyrights from the U.S. Copyright Office. The first is for the Bitcoin white paper. You got the title, which is Bitcoin Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. And the second is for you writing most of the code, which is version 0.1. So how does that feel to finally get these grants of the registration of the copyright? And what kind of significance does that mean for Bitcoin?
Well, where people go wrong is the copyright was always effectively mine. And people don't look at the early version of the code, but it was actually copyrighted. So it wasn't without IP or anything like this. What copyright means is in a registered area like the US, I have the ability to enforce my rights now. So many people think that it's all a joke, it's just a simple government registration, but you have to attest. So people don't understand that means you have to fill out a form and not only say that, but you have to swear effectively or attest that you are that person. So going forward, if anyone else does this or anyone wants to contest it, it ends up with a court process. And what then happens is if someone is saying, we don't believe you, whatever else, then they can put evidence, I can put evidence, and we have how the world works outside of a bunch of school children who don't think that law is important.
Mm-hmm. So you essentially had to confirm to the U.S. Copyright Office that you are indeed Satoshi Nakamoto. That's what you did. So I just wanted to ask you, right here, right now, are you Satoshi Nakamoto? You are indeed Satoshi Nakamoto?
That is my pseudonym, yes.
Okay. Wow, here we are. So now there is an MIT open source software on the code. And so I wanted to get an idea of how that relates to this copyright now on the code that you now have.
Copyright and licensing are different things. So what you will notice that, well, basically there's an MIT license, as you said, which is correct. So people can take and use and create using blockchain. I'm not stopping that at all. So something like Litecoin was really built as a copy of Bitcoin. And that's actually fully legal. That's valid. There's nothing wrong with that. Ethereum was based on a blockchain design and code of mine, of Bitcoin. All these other coins that are using blockchain, everything there is based on my original concept. And under a licensing agreement, they're allowed to do this. We're not going to step in and stop any of that. The difference now is where you start passing off or pretending to be something else. So if you make a airdrop version of Bitcoin, like BTC Core, SegWitcoin, or Bitcoin or anything, then what you're effectively doing is telling people that you have Bitcoin when you don't. Mm-hmm. So what these people, like the guys in CoreCoin, are doing is pretending to have Bitcoin and fooling people. This whole scaling through an ETF thing, it's really about conning people into getting in so that they can get the price up and get out. Mm-hmm. And that's called fraud.
Mm-hmm. Because BTC and all the rest, they're basically airdrops. As soon as they added SegWit, as soon as they changed it and deviated from the original protocol, that's when it was the airdrop, where Bitcoin, ticker symbol BSV, of course, so with Bitcoin, BSV, that is always been Bitcoin because it's never changed and it's always stayed on its original protocol, right?
Yes, mm-hmm. There can only ever be one Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. You can have other blockchains, they can compete, but there's only ever one Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Now, people think that this is all about exchanges. This is nothing new. The nature of this sort of exchange, Usenet shares, Pink Sheets shares, etc., goes back a long way. We go back into the mail frauds of the 18th century. But if you look into the internet scams, the ones sort of circa the 90s, you had Web IPO, which was effectively a distributed token system like ICOs now. You had MyGo and others, and this is nothing new. So people are going, it's distributed, but the difference here is it's distributed, but now we have a blockchain as evidence. So a lot of people got away with these distributed scams, which is what they were in the past, because the evidence would be deleted. A server would go down, records would be destroyed, and then people couldn't go to jail. Blockchain changes this. If you created an ICO scam, the effective lifespan that you can go to jail is now up to 20 years. And it's fairly serious. So where you make a promise and you say, oh, it's distributed, you've got to start considering that that doesn't mean anything. So the interesting thing is the SEC versus MyGo.com in the 1990s was a very relevant case here. What happened was there were a group of individuals in a global corporation that did the equivalent of a distributed sort of exchange and company. These individuals said, we're not a company because we haven't registered, it's on the internet, it's distributed. The same argument. The difference is the SEC said, yes, you're not a company, you're a partnership. And then they sued the person in America, and partnership means unlimited liability. So what that meant was every single person who was a developer, who worked on this code, who was part of it, was liable. And strangely enough, MyGo got shut down.
And so you've got a new website out, which is CraigWright.net. So can you tell us a little bit of what kind of information and content we can find on that?
It's going to be some of the things I'm writing. I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin, law, security tokens, basically how to actually build, create, and trying to teach people and start them to understand the technology.
And you did mention at the presentation a little bit about in-script looping and op return and how it kind of relates to the opcode separator, and how you can, with the opcode separator, you'll be able to, the opcode would be able to skip to the next, kind of skip around with the opcode separator or something along those lines. So if you want to explain a little bit about that.
It's probably a bit too complex to do in 2 minutes here, but we'll be putting up material to start educating people. But the way to look at this would be having multiple separate functions that can all be then settled and set in stone on chain. So there'll be multiple paths that can be signed, sometimes in advance, that allow different things, such as a B-tree type flow, allowing you to create very complex algorithms and functions that once they've run, can't be changed. So something like a Wang B machine, if anyone's gone back into that form of Turing machine, they'll find it's a machine that runs on a forward tape. So it's an immutable system, unlike a standard Turing machine, where it can read back and forwards. A Wang machine writes forward, but can read backwards.
And this all relates to what you had mentioned before about being able to make a payment to any address, and also being able to set a public key after the exchange. Is that all related to that at all?
Is it a different invention?
Oh, okay.
So the R puzzle bit is using the R part of an RS in a signature, allowing you to then have a shared secret that is not seen by miners or other parties, that can be distributed, that can be calculated, etc. That then you can calculate, if you know that, another signature.
And just one last question. What are some of the things that you're working on that you're excited about for the future?
EDI, scaling, building Bitcoin so that it's more robust, getting up to terabyte blocks in the next year or so.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Dr. Wright, and speaking with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here in Toronto.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks for your time, Dr. Wright.